It's not all doom and gloom around the New York Islanders. Today, we talk about some reasons for optimism. We also look back at some missed opportunities by management, and we look ahead to William Dufour's season and future outlook. We've got all this and more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Wednesday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everybody for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can now also find us on SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search for Locked On Islanders. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook is the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. We have got a lot to discuss on today's show, but first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe something you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, feel free to send us an email at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we talk about whatever it is that's on your mind. You could follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Isles, and you could follow me, Gil Martin, on Twitter at Ice Wars, NYRVSNYI. We've got you covered throughout this offseason. Hirings, firings, trade rumors, free agency, the draft, you name it. If it's Islanders related, we will talk about it here on the Locked On podcast, Locked On Islanders podcast. And we're here every day to talk Islanders with you. So, I always read and respond to comments on YouTube, and if people send me an email or comment on Twitter or wherever, I'm always going to try to respond. And, somebody made the comment on the show after yesterday's podcast, and everydayers, you listened and know what was said yesterday, and basically said, hey, this channel is getting a little depressing. And I did not want to fall into that mode all full time, because I look at this team, and yeah, there are issues. There are plenty of issues that this team needs to work out. And we've talked about so many of them. The need to get younger, more skilled, faster. Those are the big three. And then if you break it down more specifically, you want to add a puck-moving defenseman. You want to add a sniper, ideally, although with the cap situation, you probably can't do both right away. And again, everydayers know we talked about that on several shows, but there are also some reasons for optimism surrounding this team. And let's go over some of those, because there are reasons for hope. And the thing is that, Lou Lamoriello at his press conference talked about believing in the core. And we're all tired of hearing him say that, but guess who put together the core? That's why he believes in it. But again, this team does have some very solid pieces. Not to say it's perfect, not to say there aren't issues, because we've talked about those. But look, let's start with the biggest positive this team has going for it. Ilya Sorokin was a Vezina Trophy finalist in goal this year. That means, according to members of the media covering the National Hockey League, Sorokin had one of the three best seasons of any goalie in the league. And while Linus Ullmark is almost certainly going to win the Vezina, and whether he deserves to or not is a different story, but to have an elite goalie like Ilya Sorokin, who had 6 shutouts, that led the league, your .924 save percentage, your 2.34 goals against average, and who got 31 wins on a team that struggled to score goals all season long. It's pretty darn impressive. And you look back, he's 27 years old. He is in the prime of his career, and he should have, let's say, 6 or 7 more, at least 5, probably 6 or 7 prime seasons left. So you have a foundation right there. And even with the shortcomings that the Islanders have, Sorokin will keep them in and steal a lot of games that this team realistically is going to be outplayed in and is not going to be the better team over the course of 60 or 65 minutes. But because they have the elite goalie, the better goalie, they are still capable of winning those games or getting a loser point in some of those games. And that realistically means that any night that Sorokin is out there and playing like Ilya Sorokin, the Islanders have a chance to win the hockey game. You also have a foundation right now of players that you can build around. And look, you have Ryan Pulock and Adam Pelech on defense. You have Noah Dobson, who is still young, should continue to improve. We know defensemen take longer than forwards usually to develop and get consistent. I hope that Dobson's problems on defense were growing pains and not what he's going to be like throughout his NHL career. And if that is the case, Dobson can be a solid offensive defenseman for this team, again, young, for years to come. You've got a couple of proven 30-goal scorers on this roster. Brock Nelson, who has put together back-to-back 30-goal seasons, as has Bo Horvat. Now, Horvat obviously did not live up to the advanced billing when he came to the Islanders, losing, certainly, not having Mathew Barzal there for most of the time he was there during the regular season certainly did not help. But again, you have Barzal, you have Horvat, you have Nelson. Those are 3 core pieces that you can build your offense around. You've got 3 core pieces that you can build your defense around. And then you have an elite goaltender. And okay, that's 7 guys. You still have to fill in, the rest of the roster. But that is the foundation. None of those guys that I mentioned, with the exception of Brock Nelson, are over 30 years old. These are younger core guys who either are not yet in their prime or are in their prime now. Horvat's in his prime. Barzal is about to begin his prime. Sorokin is in his prime. Pelech and Pulock in their prime. These are guys that you can create a solid team around. So it's not all doom and gloom here on the island. But there are things this team still needs to do to get that core to be more than a fringe playoff team. And the fact that they don't seem to be willing or able to do it under Lou Lamoriello over the last couple of seasons is the reason a lot of fans are concerned and disappointed and, worried about the future of this team. So not all gloom and doom here on the Locked On Islanders podcast. And we did just want to lay out some of the good things going on with this hockey team. We have got more to get to on today's show. We will talk a little bit about some missed opportunities that this team had over the course of the last couple of years that, again, kind of do bother a lot of fans. Plus, we'll look at William Dufour, the top prospect in the Islanders system, and what his future with the team is like. All that and more still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can make your way to FanDuel right now because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. And this is a great time to think about betting because, look, the NBA Finals just ended. Stanley Cup Final could be wrapping up. But baseball in full swing. You have an idea now of where players and teams are. You could make a very nice bet on baseball. And then NFL futures, NHL futures, NBA for next season. Check out the odds because it's all there at FanDuel. And they have great promotions every day that you can check out on the FanDuel app. It's safe and secure. And when you win, you get paid instantly. So there's no better place to bet all the playoff action and all the action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. So, missed opportunities. And to me, I'm going to go back again and refer to something Lou Lamoriello said at his press conference. And he said something to the effect of, loyalty will not get in the way of improving this team. Well, I wish that was indeed true because you look at the last couple of years and that has not been the case, especially at the trade deadline. Lou Lamoriello had an opportunity at the trade deadline last year to trade Semyon Varlamov, didn't do it. Now Varley, he could resign or he could leave for no compensation whatsoever. And I understand Varlamov as an insurance policy in case Sorokin got hurt, but how many games did Varley play after the trade deadline for the New York Islanders, who were in this tooth and nail battle for one of the final playoff spots in the Eastern Conference? And yeah, they ended up squeezing in. Do you remember how many games Semyon Varlamov played? If you said 3, you were right. You can't tell me that Corey Schneider couldn't have played 3 games, 2 games if you didn't feel confident in him. The Islanders could have gotten maybe a second-round draft pick for Varley at the trade deadline. And then if you really like Varlamov and he really likes playing on the island and is willing to come back and sign at a reasonable rate to be the backup again next year, you still could have re-signed him because he would be on an expiring contract. But whether it was loyalty to Varley or Varley's wishes, or whether it was concern about not having 2 quality goalies for the Stanley Cup playoff drive, Lou Lamoriello did not make the trade. And I think Varlamov would have gotten you a second-round pick and or a prospect. And, look, there were a number of teams at the trade deadline looking to get goaltending for the playoffs. Varley would have made sense for a lot of them. No deal is made. Trading him would not have precluded the Islanders from re-signing him. He only played 3 games. That was a missed opportunity. Same kind of a situation for Scott Mayfield. Now, with Mayfield, I think there was a little bit less of an issue in the sense that the Islanders didn't have the depth to replace Mayfield in the lineup if they traded him. So I think trading Mayfield would have hurt the playoff drive a little bit more. And you also have to remember, due to injuries, Romanov ended up getting hurt down the stretch. You were playing, Parker Wotherspoon, and you were playing Samuel Bolduc, and you were also, Sebastian Aho in the lineup. You had Dobson in the lineup, struggling in his own zone. That was a little bit more risky. But again, the issue is you now risk losing Mayfield for nothing. And again, if you make that trade and he wants to come back to Long Island and sign a new contract this summer, it was still doable. So that was a missed opportunity. I know if you go back the year prior, you had Cal Clutterbuck on an expiring contract. Islanders chose not to trade him, bring him back. Could have made some trades of those kind of veterans, your Clutterbucks. Could have traded Ross Johnston possibly if there was interest, but there were players on the Islanders roster over the last couple of years who you could have traded and gotten some return for them. And these are missed opportunities to improve your team, even if it doesn't improve them right away. Even if you're talking about improving your team 2-3 years down the road. Because one big problem with trading away your first round draft pick 4 years in a row is that it really erodes your prospect pool. And there's no replenishment. You're not bringing in a new guy like, okay, the Islanders just traded in the Bo Horvat deal Aatu Räty. They traded him. He was the top-rated prospect in the Islanders system, and they dealt him away. There's no number one pick this year or next year or last year or this year or 4 years in a row. There's no number one pick to replace Aatu Räty in your system. And, if you would have traded Varley for a number 2 pick and or a reasonable prospect to improve your prospect pool, that transition that is inevitably going to happen when your older players, and we know 12 players on this roster over 30, when those players start to decline and they get injured more often, you need to have young guys ready. And either whether you get a prospect or you get a draft pick, that's how you rebuild and replenish. And you can rebuild sort of on the fly if you have the right pieces available to step in. And another missed opportunity in my mind for the way this team has done business under Lou Lamoriello. And look, they've been successful in a lot of ways. 5 years under Lou, 4 years in the playoffs, 2 trips to the conference final, playoff wins in 3 out of the 4 years they were in the postseason, series wins. So I'm not saying this is all bad, but you need to replenish your farm system, and you need to get the lack of trust that this organization under Lou Lamoriello and under Barry Trotz, and less so, I think, under Lane Lambert, but the lack of trust they have in younger players, their lack of faith in younger players, their inability to develop a lot of younger players and get them into the lineup. And I think, Noah Dobson is really the only exception right now over the last couple of years. Oliver Wahlstrom, Aatu Räty, so many guys have just been stalled and their development has been delayed because of the reluctance of this organization to have a little faith and deal with some of the growing pains that go along with trusting a younger player in the lineup. And I'm not saying you play 5 or 6 of them, but 1 or 2, you could do that. And even when they do play guys, they're on such a short leash, it damages their confidence, and I think it's a mistake. So these are the kind of missed opportunities that have frustrated me. And from all the interactions I've had on social media and in comments and in emails, frustrated a lot of Islander fans. So while there are a lot of reasons for optimism, there are also concerns and missed opportunities. And well, we've covered both ends of that a little bit on the first 2 sections of today's show. We've got more to get to. William Dufour is now considered the top prospect in the Islanders system. What was his season like, and what can we expect from him going forward? We've got all that and more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. So, William Dufour, let's talk a little bit about him. Dufour, still just 21, won't turn 22 until late January of next year, and he made his NHL debut this year, albeit in one game. And maybe that game is sort of a microcosm of the way the Islanders handle their younger players. They brought him up, put him in a game against the Boston Bruins, who were busy setting records for, wins and points and all of that stuff. He played a grand total of 6 minutes and 48 seconds, was a -2, did not get a shot on goal, had one hit, coughed up the puck a couple of times, and guess what? Was benched. I believe it was in the second period, did not return for the rest of the game. So that January 18th NHL debut for William Dufour, very much a disappointment. Now, here is a guy, he's 6'2", 215. He's got the size. He's got, some pretty good numbers, 56 goals in 66 games in 2021-22 in with the St. John Sea Dogs of the Quebec Junior League. This year, first year as a professional at Bridgeport, 69 games, 21 goals, 48 points, 51 penalty minutes. Dufour has raw ability, and there are still some concerns about his game going forward as to why he's not going to be elite. Now, the Hockey News, they ranked their top 100 prospects. William Dufour was ranked 94th. And realistically, he is making the adjustment to the pro game. He is a fifth-round pick, and the biggest issue he has right now is skating. And if his skating picks up, his shot is heavy, it's accurate, and I think he is the kind of player who, even if he's a second or third line forward ultimately in the NHL, I think can be ready to play for the New York Islanders. But the question is when. And to me, I think he'll get a look in training camp this year. And I think at some time during the season this coming year, he will definitely see more ice time, get a look, play, whether it's 3, 5, 9 NHL games, whenever there's injuries or they need maybe a jolt of offense, they can call him up. I think he's ready for full-time NHL duty in 2024, 2025, but potentially a very bright future for William Dufour. And I think, fans have, again, reasons for optimism, something to look forward to when it comes to William Dufour. And hopefully he lives up to that expectation. Time now for our Islanders' birthday of the day, and we are a day early, but Thursday will be the 50th birthday of former Islanders winger Dean McAmmon. McAmmon, originally a first-round pick by the Blackhawks back in 1991, made his debut with the Blackhawks in 91-92, his NHL debut. Later played for the Oilers, the Blackhawks a second time, the Flyers, the Flames, the Avalanche, the Blues, the Senators, and then played 18 games for the Islanders in 2008-2009, had 2 goals and 9 points in 18 games and was a +5. So wasn't an Islander long, but certainly contributed when you're talking about a guy who really was more of a third line kind of a player for most of his career, second or third line guy. Finished his career with the Devils in 2009, 2010. 996 career regular season NHL games, 4 games short of that silver stick. 186 goals, 448 points, 490 penalty minutes. Add 46 playoff games, 6 goals, 13 points in those. And, again, only an Islander for a brief period of time, but is one of his better games for the Isles. How about March 2nd, 2009 at the Old Barn, the Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum? The Avalanche are the visitors. Andrew Raycroft, their goalie. Jan Denis in goal for the Islanders. And Dean McCammond ends up scoring a goal. He is a +2, had 3 shots on goal in 14 minutes and 50 seconds. He got the scoring underway midway through the first period. John Sim and Jeff Tambellini with the assist. Islanders went on to a 4-2 win over the Colorado Avalanche in a game where Islander fans booed Ryan Smith repeatedly anytime he touched the puck for the Colorado Avalanche. So again, happy birthday to Dean McCammond. He turns 50 tomorrow, and he is our Islanders' birthday of the day. We have got a very special episode coming up tomorrow, so please watch for that. We will have a special guest, Hadi Kalakeki. He is the host of Locked On NHL Prospects, and he's going to break down the Islanders' top prospects and some players the Islanders may be looking to draft in the second and maybe even in the 4th round. Some players they're looking at, and we'll get a real in-depth scouting report on both the players in the organization and the players the Islanders may draft. So definitely make sure you join us for that. I want to thank everybody again for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every dayer. That's our show tomorrow. So make sure you join us for that. And everydayers, we will continue our player-by-player evaluation of every player on the Islanders roster with Andy and Treyoff. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.